Hello, everybody. My name's Richard Watson, and this is Anglais, the Easy Way. And today, I'd like to talk about one of my favorite books. Now, slight disclaimer. I think one of the reasons I like this book is because I've always liked kung fu films, that kind of stuff, Bruce Lee. But it's not a kung fu book. It's a fantasy and science fiction book. The book is called Heroes Die, and it's written by Matthew Woodring Stover, although I think now he just calls himself Matthew Stover. And it's the first of a series called The Acts of Cain. Now, this book was first published in 1998, and it's kind of a novel that blends different styles and genres. It's science fiction, and it's fantasy, and it's martial arts, and it's philosophy, and political protest, and all sorts of stuff. So, the plot summary. It's set in a dystopian future Earth, which has a rigid caste system. And it's also set in a parallel fantasy realm called Overworld. And it follows a guy called Harry Michelson, who's a celebrity actor known as Cain, whose violent missions on Overworld are broadcast as entertainment for the people on Earth. In this book, he's tasked, which means he's given the task, with rescuing his estranged wife. Estranged wife means his wife, but they are separating, called Shanna, from the dangers of Overworld, leading to a mission filled with political intrigue, betrayal, and, of course, personal redemption. It alternates between Cain's perspective on Overworld and back on Earth. So it's two different worlds in the same book. One kind of fantasy, because magic works in Overworld, and one back on Earth where it doesn't. So we have these two settings. We have the Earth, which is a cyberpunk dystopia controlled by corporations that exploit all sorts of people, and Overworld, which is a high fantasy world with magic and gods and monsters and complex geopolitics, and it resembles a grimdark medieval realm. Grimdark is a type of fantasy which is quite dark and violent. This book explores themes of free will versus determinism, the ethics of voyeuristic entertainment, and the psychological toll of living as both a performer and a person. It examines power dynamics, moral ambiguity, and the commodification of violence, making violence into a commodity. It's hard for me to explain this because I only know one French person who read this in French, and he thought it was rubbish. So, in English, it's slick and fast, and the dialogues are fantastic. It's got visceral, fast-paced prose with graphic violence and sharp dialogues and philosophical ideas and musings. Cain is very cynical, and he's got an introspective voice that you follow through this novel that's quite fascinating. Without going too much into the story itself, Matthew Stover is a fantastic writer. There's an old idea in books and films that you set your hero worse and worse problems to the point where he can no longer resolve them, and hopefully get him to resolve them. I don't know anybody who does that better than Matthew Stover. He's really good at it. They're very clever. They're dark, kind of violent fantasy for adults. It's morally grey. The good guys are kind of bad, the bad guys can be good, etc., etc. I remember reading in an interview when someone asked him if it disturbed him that so many people were reading Harry Potter instead of his kind of dark fantasy. And he said, no, I'm sure they're great books, and when they grow up and want something more adult, I'll be here. And I think that's a great way to think about it. Also helps if you like corny kung fu movies, of course. A lot of fighting in this book. Anyway, I'll let you discover it for yourself. I would advise you to read it in English if you can, because I don't know how good the French translation is. I haven't heard anything positive about it from the one person who's read it. So anyway, have a look at it. It's complex, and as you go through the series, it gets more and more complex. There are some amazing themes in this book. Like, if I could be a writer, I would want to write this series. They're great. Very smart. Even the way the character talks to you, because he's an actor, he can sub-vocalize his thoughts and say them to you. So you see what he's thinking as well as what he does. It's a very clever narrative trick. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Go and have fun with this one if you're ready for some kind of lethal fighting and violence, etc., etc. It's a good book. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Have fun. Catch you next time. Don't forget to subscribe.